Hello friends, relaunched here, and in today's video we are going to be talking about one of the most infamous Doctor Who stories of the Stephen Moffat era, and one that I've held off making a sort of rant video about because, well, everyone's sort of done it, but now it's finally time for me to give my thoughts on Hellbent. But before we do, if you could just do me a teeny tiny little favour and hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 10k by the end of the year, and I honestly believe that with your support, we can do it. Thank you for listening and enjoy this video. So, a little bit of context about how I watched this episode. I was not a fan of Series 9 at the time. Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, was about the time that I started to be like, yeah, maybe I don't like this anymore. So, I sort of watched Series 9 on and off throughout the rest of it. I didn't even think much of Heaven 7 when it came out. Nowadays, I appreciate it a lot more, but I still do think it's just a tad overrated. But I remember being on a Google Plus forum. You know how old this story is because Google Plus was still a thing. And I remember saying after Face the Raven came out that they're going to bring her back in the finale. Literally everyone said that I was stupid for that because of course they're not going to bring back Clara so soon after she just had that pretty noble death, to be fair, and everyone was pretty happy at the time with how she died. And then a minute into Hellbent you see her in a diner, and immediately that set off some red flags in my mind. With that said though, the first sort of 20 minutes of Hellbent are really good. I like seeing Gallifrey. I mean, who doesn't like seeing Gallifrey? It's Gallifrey. I like the intrigue about the Time Lords. I like the fact that the Doctor exiles Rassilon. I think all that stuff's great. It's as soon as the plot becomes about saving Clara that it becomes a problem, because the Doctor in this episode isn't the Doctor. He's not acting like the Doctor. He willingly shoots a guy, and people will say, oh, they're a Time Lord, they can regenerate. It doesn't make any difference. The Doctor is acting out of line, and Clara is the only one who seems to be aware of this. And this was the episode that highlighted just how toxic their relationship was, where he was literally willing to break every code he's ever stood by or ever had just to save Clara. We get to see what isn't really the Matrix, but more like the basement of the Matrix with the sliders and just sort of needless fan service. Like, why are Cybermen, Daleks and Weeping Angels there, other than just to be like, oh, they are monsters that I recognise. The Sisterhood of Khan are also there, just because they are there. The hybrid gets no real resolution at all. It's the epitome of Moffat's tendency to think he's cleverer than he actually is, where it's like, oh, I'm so clever, the hybrid's such a great idea that it doesn't actually need a resolution, it can just be nothing, and that'll be a satisfying conclusion. Like, no. Bad Moffat. If you're going to have a series-long arc about this mysterious hybrid, which is allegedly a hybrid between two warrior races, you better have a resolution to that idea already thought out. Because if you don't, whatever you come up with is unsatisfying. That was the problem with the Stephen Moffat era. He'd come up with these really cool concepts, but have no real way of finishing them off. So what you end up with is this really uneven story arc for a lot of it. And this is a problem that affected his entire era, but I think the longer it went on, the more obvious it became. And the hybrid, as I said, is the epitome of that, because it literally goes nowhere. The hybrid just doesn't matter, and we're not supposed to care, even though this is what the entire series has been built on. So even people who are invested in the hybrid storyline, which I wasn't one of them, aren't going to be satisfied because they don't even get a decent answer. I do also dislike the fact that the Doctor coming back to Gallifrey, it does play up that messianic thing again, which works in the Davies era, because in the Davies era it's sort of shown to be an issue, whereas in the Moffat era, when the Doctor's treated like a godlike entity, it's seen as a good thing, and I think it kind of misses the point of what RTD was going for, where the Doctor shouldn't be able to abuse this power and needs to stay grounded hence the need for a companion. There is something messianic about it when he is sitting eating his soup and all the Time Lords or Shobogans are just watching him. Again, that scene is cool, but like, it does highlight that issue. There's also that line about, this is the only time I've been a man, that last body, dear God, how do you cope with all that ego? I think that's the line. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you get the gist. I don't think that line's as bad in hindsight. I think it's just Moffat trying to overcorrect the fact that he couldn't write women very well. So his remedy to that was, rather than to write female characters that weren't just, hey doctor, I am feisty, instead he goes, men bad, I have now cured sexism. This is almost when the show felt the most desperate for relevance as well. Getting a minor character from Game of Thrones, like, you know, obviously Maisie Williams, to play such a pivotal role in the series and literally be the only person left alive at the end of the universe because she's immortal, and her literally being able to talk to the Doctor as an equal, it just highlighted the fact that they really wanted the appeal of the mainstream audience while not really understanding what made Doctor Who so appealing to mainstream audiences in the RTD era, which was its simplicity to casual audiences. I don't know which one's more confusing, Hellbent or The Timeless Children. Both are just a mess of ideas that just do not come together at all. I think at least with like The Timeless Children, they explain the concept of it fine enough. I think the problem with Hellbent is just that there isn't really a concept, it's just a thing that doesn't matter. But the thing that I hate the most about this episode, and regardless of the hybrid, regardless of how it wasted Gallifrey completely, regardless of how it made the Doctor a completely different character who abandoned his moral code, how it basically butchers Clara's arc. Now, if you'll remember, in Series 8, the main arc is that Clara shouldn't act like the Doctor, and acting like the Doctor is going to get her killed. This was first introduced, I believe, in Flatline, or at least that's when I first noticed it, with this line.
You were an exceptional Doctor, Clara.
Thank you.
Goodness had nothing to do with it.
And it was later reinforced again in Darkwater Death in Heaven, where she pretends to be the Doctor, and she sort of fails at it.
How much more do you need? I'm the Doctor.
This information is not proof.
So it was building up this idea across Series 8, and a bit in Series 9 as well, that being like the Doctor isn't a good thing, and that you aren't necessarily a good person if you are the Doctor. Cut to Hellbent.
The long way around.
And Clara gets rewarded with her own TARDIS and companion, essentially making that entire arc for her character completely null and void because she still ends up being the Doctor anyway. And people will say, oh well, she does have to die eventually. I'm like, well yeah, but so does the Doctor eventually, but it's not going to happen, is it? The Doctor eventually has to return the TARDIS at some point, but it's not going to happen. And people have said to me, why should people be punished for acting like the Doctor? And my response is always, I don't know, ask Stephen Moffat, because that's what he was setting up. The only thing I like about this episode is the way it ends, but even that gets sort of done over by Twice Upon a Time. So basically the way this is resolved is that in order for, you know, the universe not to collapse, the Doctor decides to wipe Clara's memory of him, kind of similar to what he did in Stone Earth Journey's End with Donna Noble. But actually the reverse happens and Clara ends up wiping the Doctor's memory of her, which is why he doesn't recognise her properly in the diner, and he just ends up playing Clara's theme to her without actually knowing what it means. Which, by the way, is a testament to Murray Gold's music, that it was so good that it got written into the show. But he doesn't know who she is, and Series 10 goes along, and he doesn't know who Clara is. Cut to Twice Upon a Time, however, and through some magical Christmas bullshit with the glass people, I can't even remember what they're called, she gets restored to his memory.
Hello? You stupid old man.
And that was really just the last sort of screw you of the Moffat era, really, where it's like, oh, even the one part of Hellbent's ending that was halfway decent, you couldn't even let that stick. So that just makes Hellbent even more pointless. There's also the fact that they call back to the half-human thing, which no one ever wanted a reference to. I get what Moffat was trying to do, but no one wanted a reference to the half-human thing. They just didn't. This episode has a problem that a lot of the Moffat era had, especially towards the end, where it's far too reliant on fan servicey stuff. Like, you can't just show us an old TARDIS and expect that to be satisfying for viewers. It's not. The ending of this episode, though, is quite cool, where he gets back to the TARDIS reactivates, and he gets a new sonic screwdriver. That stuff's all quite cool. And I actually don't mind the Capaldi screwdriver, which I know some people really dislike. I actually quite like it. You could have done so much with the return of Gallifrey, you could have done so much with the return of Rassilon, but it just doesn't happen, and you end up wondering, what was the point? Why build up the return of Gallifrey for like 10 years if all you're going to do with it is be like, it's all about Clara? I think the problem was as well, everyone was ready for Clara to leave by the end of Series 8, so she already had felt like she outstayed her welcome by the time Face the Raven came along. Making her the penultimate feature of the Gallifrey story, I think, just was the icing on this turd of a cake. No one wanted her to be this prevalent in a story that we'd all been waiting for so long, and that had been built up in Series 8 especially, with Missy giving the Doctor fake coordinates to Gallifrey, only for them obviously not to work. This has been something that's been built up for so long, and it just doesn't have any payoff at all. I think that's what's most disappointing about this. It's the fact that it not only guts the character arcs, but it just doesn't have a reason to exist, and it actively insults long-time viewers for their interest in Gallifrey. Like, haha, you shouldn't have been interested in the hybrid or Gallifrey because none of it matters. I think this is where Stephen Moffat felt the most trolly, and I don't want to come across as a Moffat hater in this video because I do enjoy his stuff a lot, particularly his earlier stuff with Matt Smith. I'm a big Matt Smith era apologist, kind of famously, but this is just the point where I think everyone just went, yeah, can you leave now? Little did we know who we'd get next, but that's besides the point. But yeah, I think this is going to wrap up this rant about Hellbent. If you did enjoy, be sure to give it a like, comment down below your thoughts on Hellbent, and subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later.